It all boils down to a question of adoptees' rights versus the birth mother's right to privacy. And to help sort us through all the issues, we have an adoption attorney here in Kansas City, Jim Waits. Thanks so much for coming.
It's a pleasure.
You have been in adoptions in Kansas City and the Missouri area for 30 years. So you've seen and you know this problem. Tell us what the law is in Missouri.
Well, presently, it's a sealed record. In fact, it's a crime for the record to be disclosed without the permission of the court.
We're talking about the original birth certificate.
That's correct, and the adoption records that were generated when the adoption was filed. But there's a mechanism where the adopted child can contact the court and request that that information be disclosed. The court then, on its own, or engages the adoption agency if they're still in existence, and they make an attempt to contact the biological parent to see if they're willing to have their identity disclosed. And if they can't find them, or if they aren't willing to disclose their identity, then the record remains sealed.
And there's also a state law in Missouri about the privacy of that record.
Absolutely.
And so what have you seen in terms of the anguish on both sides of this issue? For the adoptees first.
For the adoptees, the frustration to know that the information is there and available, and that it's simply a judge having the ability to say that you can or can't see it is very frustrating. I know there was an occasion several years ago in Jackson County where someone needed to identify a blood relative for a bone marrow transplant. They were dealing with cancer. And the court contacted the birth parent, who declined to have their identity disclosed, and that was the end of the case.
So it's really an issue of, you have to go, mother, may I? And if the birth mother says no, then the adoptee is just left out in the cold.
That's right. They
do not get to know and see that birth record of who she is, or the birth father as well, the biological father.
Right.
And so I'm an adult person. I know a 71-year-old woman now in Missouri who I've talked with on the phone, who tells me that she can't get that information, and she probably suspects that her parents are both not living anymore. So
now, on some very old adoptions, the records are pretty slim.
Yeah.
And the ability of the court to find people after 20 or 30 years might be pretty limited. But sometimes the records are there and they're just not able to be disclosed because the birth parent declines.
So are there cases where there is a happy reunion? We talked a little bit about this, where you've covered, obviously a lot of adoptions, you've dealt with them, and so some of the adoptees come back to you years later and say, hey, I would love to connect, and you had that reconnection happen.
We've had a few instances where I was able to contact a birth parent long after the fact and ask if they were willing to have their identity disclosed to the child they had placed for adoption, and they were willing to do that. I wasn't present for any of the reunions, but I have received accounts. It was a very happy circumstance.
But you're very concerned about keeping the protection of this birth mother private.
I am. Imagine the circumstance of a 14-year-old who has a baby and opts to place that baby for adoption. Now 20 years have passed. She has a family and other children. Maybe she's decided not to disclose to her new family what she experienced as a teen. And I can respect her decision, and to say that that adopted child always has the right to know her identity conflicts with her right to privacy, and it's not easily solved. The legislature has a scheme in place that they thought was the best compromise possible, but some people will be left out and be unhappy with the outcome. It's just a conflicting set of people's rights.
It is a real sticky wicket for sure. Now, I've asked this question on my Facebook page: what do you think, should Missouri adoptees have the right to see their own original birth certificate? So you can go to my Facebook page and weigh in on that question. We'll have my special report coming up tonight at 10. And also tonight, you are going to be speaking about adoption and the law. Catholic Charities is having an event. Tell me about that.
Catholic Charities will host a series of events during the year. It's designed for prospective new adoptive couples, and it's an opportunity to have an explanation of how the private adoption process works, the risks, the timing, the expense, the like.
All right, starts at 7 o'clock tonight at Catholic Charities, downtown Kansas City. Thanks so much, Jim, for being here and for sharing.
My pleasure.